Thanks a lot, Tim. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone for tuning in. This is kind of a crazy year, and this is a little different, so appreciate it. Um, so today we're here to talk about platforms, multi-sites, and platforms. Um, we'll first quickly give you an idea of who we are. Then we're going to talk about why you are here, and how Drupal does support platforms. And then we'll talk about some different platforms as a service providers that are out there and how they support these different approaches. My name is Adam Weingarten. I'm a senior technical architect from Mindtree. I've been doing Drupal 6, 7, 8, and now 9. A little bit of back end, a little bit of front end, a whole lot of Drupal architecture, and working on kind of large scale enterprise projects. And my partner in crime here is John Doyle.
Yep. Hi, everyone. John Doyle from Digital Polygon. Worked with Adam, I don't know, going on about 10 years now, off and on, various companies and projects, and been really heavily involved in the Drupal space, really around enterprise architecture and multi-sites. Excited to be here and talking to you guys today.
Yeah, so like I said, so we've done a lot in enterprise, and also more than just enterprise website builds, a lot of bailing out problematic builds. So John and I both had a bunch of those. Most of the builds that we work on are these kind of large scale, massive enterprise builds with extremely complex architectures. And we've done a lot on basically building maintainable and stable sites.
Yep.
And just making sites that can scale to handle the traffic that you have.
Yeah, and really about 80% of the sites that we work on are platforms or multi-site. It's been quite an adventure working through the the issues and the challenges that organizations have with it. And we're really excited to bring that knowledge to you today. So why are we here? To talk about platforms, of course. So we thought it made sense to start with the basics. What is a platform? A platform is a group of technologies that are used as a base upon which other applications, processes, and technologies are developed. Great, that's really generic, right? So let's take a look at some examples, right? There's multiple types of platforms. Hosting platforms like Acquia, Pantheon, Lagoon by Amazee, software platforms like Drupal, which is why we're all here, and then application platforms like Australia.gov and Georgia.gov. And these are platforms built on platforms, right? And today we really want to focus on the application level platforms and talk about some of the pros and cons of doing them, if you should or not, and really help you through your decision-making process here of, is a platform right for me?
Yeah, so why do organizations build application platforms? So generally it all starts with someone has seen that there is a pattern that is happening on your websites. There's a bunch of websites that all have similar requirements, similar capabilities, maybe needs for brand consistency. So they all need to have a certain look and feel. Georgia.gov does a great job of that. Maybe there's common features. Hey, you want a blog, everyone wants a blog. So we can quickly share that. Another reason is that you have a whole bunch of sites that are weighing you down in terms of maintenance. If they have enough shared functionality, you can streamline updates. Patching like 3 or 4 sites in a day, like when a random Drupal security update hits, is not fun. It's a heck of a lot easier if you can do it once on your platform and then kick back the rest of the day. Speed is definitely a big part of it. Often, and we're not talking about the speed of your website, we're talking about the speed of business. So how quickly can you respond to your your business users' needs. So for example, let's say that your business users come to you and say, hey guys, I need a new site for COVID. Some organizations might come back and say, well, that's going to take us about 6 months to do. That's not an acceptable answer. Like in 6 months, things are going to be totally different with COVID. Like there's stuff that needs to get out today. So with a lot of these different platforms, there are paths to getting sites out very, very, very quickly. And then finally, those two come together and give you some savings at scale. The scale at scale is kind of like an asterisk. You don't get savings until you get to scale. But when you do, you reduce a lot of redundancy, repetitive tasks, things that you have to do over and over again on your different sites. And you can start to consolidate different teams and resources. So that way you're focusing on solving a problem once as opposed to solving it again and again. It gets you off that hamster wheel. Now, what does it take to actually build and maintain an application platform? It is not easy. You need a solid team. You need some good architects. You need good leads. You can do like good code reviews. You need developers who have some experience. They've at least worked in Drupal individual sites before. They understand the consequences of their actions. Not all developers do. We'll talk more about that. You need organizational buy-in. And this one is really, really important. And this is one of the top reasons that they fail. You need a great executive sponsor who wields power. If you don't have that, you are going to be run over anytime that you try to do anything on your platform. You need a strong product owner to exercise that will and power, and to apply judgment and to work with the different groups. And then finally, you need to have automation in place to scale. If you have 100 sites and you don't have a CI/CD pipeline or testing automation, or even a standard way to deploy everything, you're going to be in big trouble. On top of that, monitoring. If you have 100 sites, maybe there's a few of them that don't get traffic regularly. It may be there's going to be a propagation delay before you find out that something has gone wrong. So all those pieces are really, really super important. Now, some of the considerations for application platforms are, yes, at scale, it's cheaper, but there's a lot of money that you need to put in. It's going to be at least double the cost of building just a normal site. You're going to need to build at least one reference site and then one site that implements your kind of reference architecture. You're going to need to make sure that you think about how all the pieces come together and get shared. Takes time. Governance, this harkens back to what we said in the previous slide. That product owner is really going to be your goalie. Without that governance, you're going to get fragmented and you're not going to have a platform. It'll just collapse and you'll have just individual sites that are loosely coupled. And it'll be even worse than if you had just built them independently. And then, again, the applications that we're building here are going to be more complex. So you need those pieces so that you don't kind of lose your mind in the process.
Yep. And these are the three most prominent reasons that me and Adam get pulled into projects to rescue them, is because someone thought it was going to be way cheaper to implement, or they didn't have the right governance model up and they need help setting up, how do I manage this platform? It's kind of gone off the rails, or they don't have the automation in place and there's more bugs than there are tickets. Just
it probably starts with the estimates too. Like a lot of people they underestimate when they're selling the work or scoping the work, what's actually involved here.
Yep, exactly. All right. So how can we support, now that we know what it takes to run a platform and things that we should think about, let's talk about how does Drupal support a platform out of the box. The first way is multi-site, right? Drupal core comes with this great feature called multi-site. And multi-site is good. It has its issues. It's kind of an afterthought for Drupal, something that they have been supporting for, I don't know, at least since Drupal 6, when I started with Drupal 10 years ago. So it's been around, it's been tested, but it is not at the forefront of what Drupal aims to be. It has nowhere near the test coverage of single site Drupal using the core. But anyway, the actual structure of multi-site for Drupal, you have shared hosting, you have a shared code base with themes and modules in your all directory, right? Or in your modules directory in Drupal 8 and 9. And then each site has its own set of database modules and themes that it can override if you choose to go that route. Now, the more you customize on a multi-site, the harder it is to manage as a platform. So those are things that you need to keep in mind when you're building a platform. Domain access. I don't think we'd be right talking about multi-site implementations or platform implementations without giving credit to the contrib space. Domain access is kind of that piece, at least that we've had exposure to. And this basically allows you to manage multiple websites from within a single Drupal install. It has its pros and cons. It's all on one database, which can lead to challenges with performance and depending on the load that you get for the servers. But everything is shared, and then there's some UI that you can manipulate to give each site that you spin up its own logo, its own colors, and you can extend that pretty easily to support that in a single site or single core Drupal install.
And the thing that's kind of cool about domain access is it allows you to kind of start to propel the idea of the multi-site into a concept of content. Like it basically becomes stuff that is editable within the scope of the CMS. And then all that you have to do essentially is wire up DNS, SSL, and boom, you're done. Walk away.
Exactly. Cool.
Yeah. So building platforms on Drupal is not, we've said it's not easy. So platforms are kind of an afterthought for Drupal. There is some support. I mean, there is multi-site, and that's great and everything, but it's not really a core use case that's often tested well in Drupal core. You know, the main cases that really do get testing are individual site installs. There's just a lot of edge cases and weird quirks that come out when you start doing stuff with multi-site. The other problem in core is that configuration management. So in Drupal 7, you would have worked with features. In Drupal 8 and 9, you have configuration management. So it takes all your different code and config and content types, it serializes them to YAML, and then dumps them into the default into a default directory. Great. It works really, really well for individual sites. When you start to have a multi-site or a platform, things get complicated really fast. And as a result, if you need a deviation from one site to another, things get rough, and we'll kind of show you how. And again, we talked about talent. Finding people that know how to do some of the stuff is really hard. Like there aren't that many people who actually understand how to use, for example, like Acquia Site Factory. It's a scarce skill. Let's see. So on some of the headaches, just everything is harder on a multi-site. Whatever it is you want to do, add more time. We threw a couple of issues here that we had encountered recently. And the reason here is like you're gonna encounter problems, and some of them are gonna drive you insane. You're gonna go crazy. You're gonna want to gouge your eyes out. You're gonna question your sanity. And the point here is not to terrify you or traumatize you. It's just to simply say you're not crazy. You're not alone. Other people have encountered these issues. So just like before you go there, just like take a step back, breathe, count to 10, and then go hit the issue queues. Because I promise you, whatever problem you're having, someone else has already faced. So some of the interesting ones that we faced recently were we put some modules into a site / my multi-site directory. And when we cleared cache, the site blew up. We were doing some refactoring, something moved, something changed. It did not like that. So Drupal core didn't really take that into account well. There's a core issue. I think it's been fixed, but it was something that definitely burned us. We ended up working around that by just moving the modules into the primary modules directory, which is what normal single site install vanilla Drupal does. So when you get burned by different multi-site features in Drupal, you can always try to fall back to a less multi-site way of doing things, and you sometimes get lucky.
Yeah.
The other one, go ahead, John.
Yeah, the same applies to your tooling and your automation that goes around it, which is really what these Drush issues that Adam's pointing out here are. You know, you're not the only one to face it. There's a lot of people doing this, and there's a lot of issues in the queue with work to them. But again, it's not the primary use case of Drupal. So a lot of these are issues because they're not tested in the first round of the features going out.
Yeah. By the way, someone in the queue did mention that features is still a thing for Drupal 8 and 9. It is, and it is especially useful for multi-sites or for platform situations. So we will mention that a little bit later. It's not necessarily the primary use that people are using as much in some ways for single sites, but it is still being used heavily.
Yeah, exactly. So core CMI doesn't work well out of the box. There is contrib support, config split, possibly features depending on what you're doing and how you're orchestrating it. Give you the ability to manage your configs on a per site basis or a per split basis, whatever that split means. Maybe you're doing environment splits. Maybe you're doing groups of site splits. You know, you're going to need to architect what the right solution is for you and your platform. But these are some key areas in your config that contrib can certainly help with. One thing to note is you should be careful of your splits and your features because they will grow exponentially. And this really requires a lot of thought up front on what you're doing. And if you don't think about this at the beginning of your project, you're going to get halfway through, figure out, oh, now I need to make a split, and then change the way that you've built your configuration management. Here's an example of how a config split kind of goes crazy. Let's say I just have environment splits, right? I've got a dev, a stage, and a prod. I need to change GA or, I don't know, some other API key, and I need to do it per environment so that I don't, mess up my tracking or whatever it might be. I need to split it by site. But wait, my site split needs to be by environment too. So now I've got 3 splits for each environment, for each one of my sites. With 100 sites, now I have 150 splits. Your splits end up looking like this maze over here. And, we wish you luck having your developer pick the right one. So
and maybe we're being a little hyperbolic. In all honesty, at any given time, you're probably thinking about maybe 6 splits. You're thinking about, essentially the default splits, or your site specific splits. And it's actually your default common split, your default environment splits, and then your site split. So it's actually probably closer to 7 that you have to worry about at any given time. And devs really, really have a hard time with that.
Yeah. So automation and documentation are super important for this. The more you can script and support your team, the better off they'll be. But again, planning is key.
But config split and features aren't going to necessarily be able to help you with everything. There are just some hangovers that just can't be helped. I don't care what like concoction you take the next day, like you're going to have a rough time. There really is dependency hell. And a lot of it comes from just the way that CMI is built. CMI is great, but it was really conceived of as a way to essentially vomit all the config out of your site into a single monolithic directory so it's in code and then it can be deployed. But they didn't break down any of the dependencies between the different configuration objects. So there's dependencies all over the place between all your different config items. So it makes it very, very hard to untangle it and then split off individual pieces. So here's an example of it. This is like one of the simplest examples I could find, which is this is a config export from an article content type. So this is the form display for it. Well, the form display now has dependencies on every single field. If, let's say, for example, I want to add a different taxonomy, let's say one of my sites is geared towards students and I have a grade taxonomy that I want to apply to the content so I can target it a little bit more effectively. Well, now I have to add that to the dependencies here, which means I either have to add it for everyone when it may not make sense. Maybe my other site is for teachers. Or I would have to essentially take this config and split it, which is not ideal either. So there's issues there. Some of the worst examples of this are like view display modes for the nodes. The entity forms, that's what we're looking at. We've got just the nodes themselves and like the fields for the nodes and then the roles. All of those have pretty harsh dependencies to deal with. Now, ultimately, the more that you fork your CMI, the more you fork your platform. So you've reduced your stability, you've reduced the reliability, the testability of your site. It's not ideal. And this is the challenge that really no one has truly solved yet in the core space. It's something that really, we hope one day will be solved a little bit better in core, but it's just not there yet. Now, we mentioned that good talent is really hard. We've said it a couple times. Like, what is a preprocessor? What is Twig? Like, these are all hard things. Typically, when you're working on a platform, you may be working with different agency partners for each site. Maybe they want to style and theme their site a little bit differently. So each one has a different theme. Maybe they don't have Drupal talent. So a great way to work around that is to potentially embrace headless Drupal. So maybe some of your sites have a conventional headed Drupal theme with maybe some customizability, but then some of the other ones are offered an option to do something headless so they can leverage more mainstream JavaScript and CSS talent. So ways to work around. And I mean, the final thing to remember is not every site actually needs to be on a platform. And this is a shout out, especially to like enterprise architects. Drupal multi-sites and Drupal platforms are like kryptonite for enterprise architects. They love this idea. It's seductive to anyone with an architectural background. There's a degree of order and reuse and elegance to the concept. But we all need to check ourselves and just be honest about, hey, if we don't have a high pattern of reuse, maybe it's not the right fit.
Yep, it's important not to force your square peg in your round hole. So how can we support hosting providers, or how can hosting providers support our applications and problems? So now let's take a look at some of the platform solutions that are available. We've only listed out a couple here. These are ones that we see most often. Pantheon, Acquia Platform, and Lagoon. There was a great presentation earlier this morning by Amazy on Lagoon. Definitely check that out. And we're not going to go into all of these today. We're just going to kind of give an overview of a couple options here that support your platforms and kind of walk you through how that would be built. The first one is Pantheon Upstream. Pantheon Upstream is a heavily tested web ops platform with the ability to set a custom upstream that is your shared code base between any site that you spin up. And you can spin up new sites off of that upstream code base with the click of a button. This works great at scale and has great test coverage. How do I know it has great test coverage? Because they use this for their own product. They use this as their managed update engine for all of their Drupal and WordPress sites. So you know that this has a good testability, good coverage, and it's a core feature of their platform. Okay, so how does it work? The first thing you have is a common upstream repo on the top left there. This is the base of your platform. This is your standard site install. It's got your shared modules, maybe your base theme in it. It's what you're going to spin up all of your sites with, and it's what you're going to push shared updates to all those sites with. Now, Pantheon also enables you to have a repo per site, where overrides can be done and customizations can be done. So you can have custom themes. You could technically have custom modules there. This provides a great amount of flexibility, but it also needs to be architected to decide what you allow and what you don't, right? If you just give everyone free reign, then they're going to put whatever they want in there, and you're not going to be able to apply your upstream updates anymore because maybe they hacked your modules, they changed your custom code. So, that has to be taken into account here. And the process for getting upstream updates into your site, they push it as a merge commit to your repo. So it is important to understand what is being managed in upstream and what is being managed in your custom code base. That is kind of sums up Pantheon's platform here. The one key to the code management is that you are able to selectively apply and merge your upstream updates to your sites, right? So that means I can make an upstream update and apply it to one of my sites or apply it to 20 of my sites at one time through scripting and automation. And I think this is a key factor in a lot of the multi-site conversations we're going to have, because not every platform allows you to choose. Some of them are all or nothing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Acquia Cloud. Acquia Cloud can support a version of this with a shared code base. It doesn't have the ability to have repos per site here without some customizations on your end. And the orchestration here is really something that you have to build and manage for their normal cloud product. They do have another product that we'll talk about shortly that does allow or is built for multi-site. But for their normal cloud subscriptions, if you really have a common code base but you want separate hardware for each site, this model can work. Acquia Cloud multi-site, again, it's the same picture as the one before, but you're deploying it to one site. Multi-site works good because all of your sites are on one platform. You're paying for one set of hardware. Some things to keep in mind is that it's all or nothing here. Your updates are applied sequentially. I don't know if anyone else has tried doing parallel processing of Drush commands on a multi-site on a single server, but it usually does not turn out well due to the Drush conflicts and things that Adam mentioned earlier. So you're somewhat limited in the ability here, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And the last one we'll talk about here is Acquia Cloud Site Factory. ACSF is a product that Acquia offers to support rapid deployment of sites that follow a common set of templates. It is separate than the normal cloud. It does have environments. It does have a lot of orchestration to allow this, and it does kind of allow you to have separate themes or separate repos, but they're limited to just the themes that apply to those sites. The key here about Site Factory and Pantheon is that both of them allow you to spin up sites with a click of a button, and the orchestration is built into their products. If you're going to use cloud, there's no orchestration available to you, but they do have like cloud hooks and stuff for you to work and automate your scripts. One other note here for really Gov folks, Acquia is FedRAMPed. So, it's one of the reasons that it's heavily highlighted here today. They are a great model for supporting cloud in the federal space. All right, Adam, let's talk about the ugly.
So, we'll just say deployments can get pretty nasty pretty fast. If let's say each deployment takes roughly like 2 minutes per site, you obviously are going to first deploy all your code. And then each site, you're gonna have to run some drush commands. You're gonna have to run config import. You're gonna run some other stuff. If you're using something like Acquia BLT, it'll run through UpDB, then config import. It'll throw some cache clears in between. 2 minutes seems reasonable. Now run that through, multiply that by 100 sites. You've got about 3 hours to deploy if you did it all sequentially. And that puts you in some interesting and uncomfortable places. You know, some of your sites may be in an indeterminate state. If you fail halfway through, it takes you too long to figure out that you failed. Not fun. So we want to go from sequential to parallel deployments. I see in the chat that actually Jane Sambury from Georgia.gov mentioned that they are doing something with parallel drush commands using GNU Parallel with Acquia. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
And yeah, and he did mention that, yeah, you do have to set that unique drush cache directory for each site. That is true. So I think that was added recently I think in the past year to Drush. You just have to be careful and make sure you do it. I think there are still a few issues with it potentially with BLT. So if you're using Acquia BLT, you may have to do a few additional configurations. But just something to keep in mind. None of these things are insurmountable though. They can all be done. Now, to work around some of this, parallelization is obviously one strategy. Another one is blue-green deployments. John, you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. So Acquia Cloud Site Factory actually handles blue-green deployments with their deployment process as part of their orchestration. And essentially, we won't get into detail here because there's already a bunch of links from previous sessions about it in the chat. Go check it out. But essentially, you apply updates to your environment that is not active. Once those are done, you flip your DNS to the other environment with the updates, and then you update the old version. So it's just redundancy to keep your site up when you have long updates like this, and you have to do it sequentially.
And more than that, just it helps you with your rollback strategy.
Yes, very much so. All right, so let's talk about some key takeaways from this presentation. I know we're running up on time here. We've got about 10 minutes left. We want to leave time for questions, so we'll go through this pretty quickly. So what we wanted to leave you with is kind of a summation of what we talked about today and how can you decide if a platform is right for you. So again, scale. Do you have more than 10 websites? If not, you shouldn't really be looking at a platform. It's probably not the right solution for you. Do you have the organizational buy-in? Do you have the central governance? And do you have a strong product owner? Without these core foundations, you will not be successful in your build. And we think about this as kind of a wheel. And if you take a notch out of your wheel and it starts bouncing, you're not going to have a very smooth ride. And that's what ends up on a lot of these platform builds that haven't thought through what it takes to run it. And as you add more sites on, it gets heavier and it bounces more, and eventually it's all going to come tumbling down. So, Adam, you want to talk about the second half of these? Are you there? You're muted.
I'm still muted. Yeah, no, we talked about automation maturity really matters. You have to be able to repeat everything. You have to be able to repeat it, not just for one site, but for all your sites. So that's important. And to get to there, really, your agile methodology, your agile delivery is especially important. We talked about how your team matters. Well, your team has to be thinking in an agile way. They have to be in a place where they're being proactive, where they're not just working on the task that is in front of them, but they're asking the question of how does this fit into everything else? What are the implications of my actions here? If I write this line of code, what are the consequences? And what could it break? What does it touch? And that's a different way of thinking than a typical waterfall developer. Waterfall developers will focus on the individual specific thing. They will do it, and to hell with the rest of the consequences. That doesn't fly with a platform. If you have people that are in that mode, you will have hot fixes and downtimes and some angry product owners and business folk. And then beyond that, you do need to make sure that you have built a flexible and modular design system. If your system is rigid and doesn't allow the users to express themselves, they are going to demand things that are going to destabilize your platform. They're going to rebel. They are going to go and stand up random little crappy WordPress sites that are on GoDaddy. It happens. So unfortunately. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you are that you're making your content types give them a little bit of flexibility. They have some dials, some buttons to push, some things in the theme that can be configured and pushed a little bit, and then also leveraging things like Layout Builder or Paragraphs or Acquia Cohesion as well. Tools like that where they can take the Lego blocks and put them together to express themselves. That dramatically lowers kind of some of the angst and pressure and kind of blowback that platforms often get. And then finally, you need to have that team that knows, how to put all these things together.
Yep. And what we'll leave you guys with is kind of a quote that really stood out to us by Joe Kaeser. The first rule of any technology used in business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify its efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. And this is 100%, 1,000% true on a platform. If you don't have the right building blocks, the efficiency just scales, and it is very apparent very fast that you're going to be setting yourself up for an issue. So with that, let's open it up to questions if we have any other ones in the queue. And I think we have about 7 minutes left.
Yeah, about.
I haven't seen any questions. Thanks, guys, for your presentation. But I'll open up for hands going up or type in the questions, let y'all respond, and I'll unmute people.
Sure.
It's interesting conversations going on about like what other services are FedRAMPed and,
Nice.
Lagoon. At least you can do self-hosting, and they do provide some support around that.
Awesome.
So that's kind of neat. So there's definitely some stuff out of Amazy for that. So it looks like Acquia plus Amazy are both possibilities if you care about FedRAMP.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyone have a question? Want to just jump in, unmute yourself? You're welcome to. I don't see any hands going up.
Hey, someone mentioned there was a Lagoon presentation earlier. Can you put a link to it in the chat or something?
Yeah, let me go find that. Sorry, I'm just looking for it now. Yeah, it wasn't maybe explicitly Lagoon. It's I think it's the future of multi-sites. I'm going to paste it into both chats.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Yeah,
Cool.
Of course.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it was by Michael Schmidt, I think. And that was, here we go. So that's in, so I just pasted it into Zoom, and I'm also pasting it into the Slack.
And where do you guys hang out for like follow-up conversations?
We'll be in both the GovCon Slack. We're also on Drupal Slack, kind of with the same names. Here, I'll jump back to the, I think it's just John Doyle and Adam Weingarten for both of them. You have our contact information here if you need to get in touch with either of us.
Okay, and the recordings for this, like the future of Drupal multi-site, I missed it. So will the recording links be posted in the
we expect those
schedule
to be up. I think we said at the end of the week.
They also be posted on the page, so we can like link to it from the page.
Hopefully on the session pages, individual session pages. Yep.
Okay, cool.
They're all dual streamed to YouTube Live too, so they should technically already be up if you rewind far enough on that.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is streamed to YouTube Live. I'm not sure if they were unpublishing those right away and then editing them later, but double check. Go to the session page, look for the YouTube Live link.
Yeah,
I guess.
We are going to be editing them and posting them later.
Oh, so they're
Thanks,
not
Kirsten.
That's
recorded.
Kirsten. Hi, everyone.
There was a question in the chat that said, config aside, would it be beneficial to take a multi-site approach to patch core and contrib modules?
I think yes. I mean, that's one of the major drivers here, right? If you're running 50 websites with separate cores and you have a critical security update that comes out on Wednesday and you need to apply it, usually unless you have some crazy orchestration on your cores, you'd have to pick and choose what went first, right? And that becomes a problem for your security team. It ends up with sites waiting weeks to get security patched. And most likely, if you don't have a core platform to support it, you're actually running on different technologies. So you have Drupal sites, you have WordPress sites, you have Joomla sites, whatever it might be. It just adds to that complexity of time and resources it takes to keep things updated. So I think it is a very heavy driver for core and contrib patches and security. And that's one of the major factors that I see organizations wanting to push for platforms.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes getting those patches out, it really is a struggle. Like a lot of places aren't familiar with moving at some of the rates by which these issues come out. I mean, we've had to fight really hard on certain projects to get people to take like some of the Drupal security updates seriously. So like, I mean, typically what we do is we aim for, I think, about 24 hours on anything that's like critical or higher. And then I think for the highly criticals, we try to do it within, like about 4 hours, I think, which is also, horrifies some people.
Yep, for sure.
But if you have a platform, it's easier to basically say, oh, we only have to do one of these instead of like 100 or, 4 or 5 overwhelms different, like change approval boards.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about it from a platform perspective, you've already thought through the automation, most likely, if you're doing it right. So you have that coverage in those tests, as opposed to if everyone runs up their own sites and their own teams in their own little world. Typically, automation is the last thing on their mind because they're focused on marketing. They're focused on, get me my new features. They're not focused on, oh, let me spend double the time. All right, it's an exaggeration. Let me spend extra time adding automation to this so that I can have a more scalable, more secure platform that I can trust and not have to manually test every time I need to do something.
One thing that we have talked about in the past, I don't think I've done it on a project yet, but we've considered it, is you could also create a central like composer dependency for like your core and contrib and then inherit that from on your different sites.
Mm-hmm.
Just as like a composer dependency, like it doesn't actually need to be anything but that. And that's one way to at least have kind of a quasi platform from a composer perspective.
Yep.
Now that doesn't help you necessarily with some of your automation, some of your regression. Those are things you still need to think about, but it is another pattern. And one that we didn't talk about, maybe we should have, maybe we'll add that for the next time we give this talk.
Yep, for sure.
Well, thanks for your presentation today, and thanks for catching that question that I missed as well from Stephen. I guess the Slack is there for anyone that wants to follow up. John and Adam.
Sweet.
All right.
Well,
awesome,
thanks,
Tim.
everyone.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
guys.
Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Yeah, some good conversations on the side too. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, those.